Now, I mentioned that integration is important, and it's a big aspect of e-commerce these days. And the next thing I'm going to show is maybe a little more technical than what we've been looking at now, a little less sexy because it's more about moving data about between your systems. So I'm going to show you the platform that we call uConnector, which is essentially a general purpose integration platform. The idea behind uConnector is that we live in a world where we have multiple different line of business systems that each deal with a piece of the puzzle when it comes to doing e-commerce. And so this is probably a scenario that you're familiar with. Interestingly, in order to sell stuff online, we need all sorts of information from other sort of systems to make it go, right? The ERP system is certainly central in that equation. We need information about SKUs, stock keeping units, item numbers, things like that, pricing information, basic product information. So we need that to be able to sell. And that's basically the information that would be necessary to make it sellable on a physical shelf somewhere. But of course, for e-commerce, we need more. We need rich media from a dedicated digital asset management system or the CMS itself. And so that also needs to go here to make the product presentable so the customers actually know what they're purchasing. Maybe we are dealing with a business that has multiple channels in which they operate, so they need product information not just for digital, but also for print and a wider number of other channels. And so maybe there's a dedicated product information management system in there, like in River or Perfion or something like that. And so this becomes a natural silo to go to get extended product information, but it's also necessary to make things sellable in a digital context. Probably we'll also need some stock information. So we'll need to know whether we can actually sell a product because, after all, maybe we're dealing with collections that are out of stock and will never come back into stock. So we need to make sure that we're not selling apparel that we can actually ship. So the WMS system, the warehouse management system, becomes important for that piece. And of course, we probably also need some customer information from the CRM to make sure that in a B2B context, for example, that we can actually sell to a customer. There's an account or something like that. Maybe we need some order history or customer history, but it all needs to be tied together in the commerce platform. So what to do? That's where uConnector comes into play. So uConnector is a general purpose integration platform. It's a server that you put into place between the various line of business systems, and it will host a number of integrations that deal with certain flows of data. uConnector is an active broker in the sense that it reaches out to a system, pulls data in, and transforms it. It uses a sort of a standard ETL model, receive, transform, and send. So notice here that I'm specifying system X and Y, and that is very much on purpose because uConnector is system agnostic. It doesn't care which system it works with. It's architected in such a way that it needs an adapter to receive information from a given system, so that's a pluggable component. It then transforms that data into a different format if necessary, and then uses another adapter to pass that information off to another system. And again, system X, system Y, it doesn't matter which one, as long as there is an adapter in place that enables uConnector to speak to the particular system. So an example that you've probably seen a million times over is your ERP system. It has those core product information, piece of product information we need. And you can see here, well, pretty common for an ERP to produce a CSV file, maybe in a file system. Maybe it can export that data somewhere. Maybe it has an endpoint that will allow us to get at that information. So uConnector is using an adapter to reach out to the ERP system, bring data in, and transform it into XML. And then using another adapter, you can reach out to uCommerce, for example, or some other platform that needs this, and deliver that information. Or the other way around. Once we have a successful e-commerce store with thousands of orders flowing in every hour, we probably need those orders to be shot back to the ERP system for the processing. So again, uConnector will use an adapter to reach out to uCommerce or any other commerce platform for that matter, pulling that information in, transforming it from SQL rows into JSON, and then passing it on to the ERP system via web service. And that's sort of the basic operation of that. The core challenge that we wanted to solve with uConnector was basically, well, actually, let me take a step back and say, well, uConnector was not actually a product we thought we would be building. So a few years back, we sort of talked to a lot of our partners. We still do. We're a very feedback-driven company, and uConnector was actually born out of that feedback because we were approached by a number of partners saying, well, integration is difficult for us. It's something that we tend to get it done, but we go over budget. It's too difficult to do, and we see very little reuse across integrations. So So they asked us if we could help with that. And so the goals for uConnector became twofold. We wanted to formalize an integration model to give partners a vocabulary to talk about integration. That's that RTS model that we looked at before. And even more, we wanted to foster reuse between integration projects. So once you've hooked up to SAP, you should be able to reuse that adapter for another integration. Once you've connected to, I don't know, Salesforce or something like that, you want to use that. And we wanted to put together an ecosystem where, because these adapters are independent of each other, once you've created an adapter for SAP, it would work with the uCommerce adapter, with the Salesforce adapter, with any other adapter. It would just require the appropriate transformation. And so we get into a situation almost like what I described in Marketing Foundation, where if you add a new piece, it will work in the overall ecosystem and enable some new scenarios that you might not even think about, because just by virtue of the model that we're using. So of course, uConnector is also built using that using that framework first approach that I keep talking about. But let me show you what it looks like. Unfortunately, a demo of uConnector is not as sexy as one of Sitecore and uCommerce, because it's all about data. And but one of the things that we realized is the fact that it's typically .NET developers that go and do integrations, right? Microsoft has had some very interesting plans around enabling this for business people, so they could put together integrations. But in my experience, it always ends up being a .NET developer doing that integration to hook the systems up. And .NET developers like Visual Studio because everybody's using that. So when we designed uConnector, we created the integration engine in such a way that it can be hosted in multiple runtime environments. Visual Studio being one, the uConnector server itself being another, and a web page being a third, if necessary. Because if you think about it, if you click a button to export data in a system, isn't that really like a little integration? You're pulling out some data from a database, mushing it up into an Excel file, and then shooting it out into the browser as the receiving system. So it is actually possible to do that. But let's talk about the actual integration that we're looking at here. So the way we did it is, each of these classes will represent an integration, and we wanted to create a system that's really readable, because one of the things that we saw when we reviewed integration code is that there would be these epic blocks of code, hundreds of lines that dealt with a single integration, and it would be difficult to see what it actually did because there's so much stuff going on. But when we sort of took a step back and looked at it from bird's eye view, we noticed that there was a sort of a common structure across these different types of integrations. And the structure is basically the RTS model that we talked about before. The top level, maybe the top 10% of an integration, would deal with bringing data in. The big middle part would deal with transforming that data and scrubbing it and things like that, cleaning it up a little bit. And then the last 10% would be about sending that information somewhere. And if you look at it, that's basically what's happening here. So if you look at this here, we're receiving product list from uCommerce, so we're bringing data in, that's the top 10%. We're then transforming that product list into something else, in this case a CSV file. And then finally we're sending that CSV file off to a destination, a file system in this case. And each of these little green blocks here are basically pluggable components that can be changed. So these are the bits that developers would be working with and changing out. So to prove the point that I made before, that uConnector is not actually tied to uCommerce in any way, we during training of this, we actually hook uConnector up to Northwind, which is it's a Microsoft database that holds some product information, some orders, a little bit of employees and things like that. And so we created an adapter for that. But the interesting thing here is that we only have to build one thing to be able to export from a completely custom database to CSV. And that's this piece here, where we're receiving a data table from SQL Server. We're receiving a very general type of data here. And you can see here I'm specifying a statement to extract that information and bring it in. But from there, this one was actually the one we were using before, exporting products from uCommerce to CSV. So just the same thing. And again, we're translating that into a file, and then we're passing that on to the file system. So the only new thing here from the other one we were looking at that did something else completely, talking to a different system, is actually the way that we connect to the system. So lots of reuse here. Let me show another example. This one here, it produces CSV, but say you want an Excel spreadsheet. Well, this transformation here does exactly what we wanted to do right now. It transforms a generic data structure to CSV, but I can just change that to say Excel instead. Oops, if I can spell, like that. And now it's using a different transformation to generate that. So it's now actually producing not CSV, but an Excel spreadsheet that can be opened up in Excel and be dealt with there if necessary. Just this little change. Again, lots of reusability or reuse between these different integrations. Once an integration is debugged by running it right here in Visual Studio, so let me just run that so you can see that works as well. It's time to deploy it. And the way you do that is you basically just plop it into the uConnector server, the binary and the configuration file that tells us the schedule to run on. And from there, uConnector will pick it up and start to run the broker, start to run the individual integrations on a scheduled basis. Here are the integrations that we were just looking at, but running, so you can debug them as a developer, try it out without actually dealing with the overhead of a full server setup. All right, that is uConnector. The way it works is uConnector is bundled with uCommerce for Sitecore because we feel like the type of e-commerce solution that you're likely to create on uCommerce for Sitecore will actually be probably something that hooks up to some sort of system. And notice I'm not talking about payment gateways and things like that. Those are integrations native to uCommerce itself. We have around 20 or 30 of those guys, so we can do credit card processing and all that. We're talking about system level synchronization of product information, inventory, orders, and all that good stuff to make uCommerce work within the overall ecosystem of the business. All right. Thank you all for sticking with me during the demo here. I really appreciate so many showing up, and any questions, please address them to myself or to Paul. We are both very happy to answer your questions. Paul's email address is right here if you need him. Thank you very much and have a great day.